It's a life sentence with no chance of parole, the life of the battery chicken. To give us each day our daily egg, millions of hens endure a life behind bars, 3 per cage, in conditions that sometimes amount to cruelty. Certainly groups like the RSPCA think so. They're about to launch a national campaign to try and have battery cages banned. And in Hamilton, a group known as SAFE, Save Animals from Exploitation, is fighting the same fight.
The animals suffer. The research is there. It's for everybody to see.
It's sentimental rubbish.
The egg farmer versus the animal welfare activist. Two sides of an argument that's raged for years, but usually out of the public eye, which incidentally is where this farmer chose to keep his hens. The birds we were allowed to film for this story certainly weren't his.
I mean,
if you've got nothing to hide...
I've got nothing to hide, but I don't really think it'd be in my interest.
You've got nothing to hide, but you'd prefer to hide it?
No, it's not so at all.
This is the world of New Zealand's more than 2 million battery hens. Behind bars, 3 per cage. They're not released until they're about 18 months old, and then only to be slaughtered. As in most other countries, each bird gets just 450 square centimetres of floor space, and that's 22 hens per square metre. Even before they're caged, the hens, as 5-day-old chicks, have endured the sharpest initiation. Here and overseas where this vision was shot, their beaks are trimmed.
I don't like doing it.
Farmer Paul Fagan describes debeaking as a necessity to lessen the damage from the hens' apparently natural behaviour of pecking each other, or even cannibalism.
The chicks, they feel a little bit of pain to start with, but in the long run it's much better off for them.
She's not the most extreme, but her beak...
At the Ruakura Animal Research Centre, animal behaviourist Dr Bill Temple says this hen, Snub as he calls her, was left by a farmer with no hard beak tissue whatsoever.
She doesn't peck as much at things, she's not as firm in her exploratory pecks, they're reduced and so on.
Suggesting that it's hurting her to do so.
That is the conclusion to which people have come, yes. We would describe it as pain.
For someone unused to poultry sheds, the first and perhaps even the worst impression is of an overpowering stench. A stench largely of ammonia that comes from the hens' droppings that are left to pile up under their cages and not cleared throughout their entire lives. As bad as it looks, this actually represents one of the benefits of cages: hygiene. By being separated from her own droppings and the droppings of others, the hen is generally protected from disease. The small groups of 3 also help. And the smaller the group, the experts say, the less likely hens are to peck each other to death.
These cages actually lack, they're not solid anymore. Look, the wires have been broken. I'll just bend these back because these animals are injuring themselves.
But try and persuade activists like Hans Kriek of the benefits. As the head of SAFE, Save Animals from Exploitation, he considers these conditions man's cruelty to creature. In their cramped cages, these 30-week-old birds must clamber over each other to move. And the longer they're there, the more they rub their feathers off against the cage sides. By a year-old, many have rubbed bare their necks and breasts from stretching over the wire to feed. Also, by now, their restricted movement has caused bone weakness and sometimes broken bones, while their floor of sloping wire, sloping for the eggs to run off, often causes foot and claw damage.
The slope in this particular farm is pretty steep, and that means that the birds are constantly sliding forward.
Some are constantly pecked, henpecked literally, with nowhere to escape. And all this despite MAF welfare codes guaranteeing animals appropriate comfort, the prevention and treatment of injury, and freedom from distress.
I sometimes compare it with locking 5 people up in a toilet and throwing away the key, basically.
And there's one more freedom denied, the freedom to display normal patterns of behaviour. That is, to act as a hen usually acts. Look at a hen in the field, and you'll see running, pecking, scratching, wing spreads. and what's known as dust bathing, in effect flicking up dirt to align the feathers and get rid of parasites. None of it possible in a cage.
I can appreciate how a hen lives its normal life. These animals lead a life full of frustration that makes me basically sick.
Tony Morrison farms about 10,000 hens in Waikato. He has no qualms about the way they're treated.
I think any farmer, being a dairy farmer, pig farmer, any farmer, he's a true farmer. He doesn't like seeing his stock in poor condition.
But I see your hens rubbed raw, their necks and their chests rubbed raw from getting at the food. I see them without feathers from rubbing up against the side of the cage. I see them spending their lives having trouble holding on because the slope on the cage is too great, and they're having to spend their entire lives fighting against the slope. That cannot be a happy hen, surely.
Well, if it's not happy, it won't lay.
It's a simple answer, and one we heard often. Productivity equals happiness. Farmer Fagan, for example. How can you possibly defend keeping 3 hens per cage for their entire laying life?
Well, they are happy. If they weren't happy, they wouldn't be laying eggs.
People concerned for the welfare of animals don't really buy productivity as a criterion.
Dr. Temple is less than convinced.
I think myself that it's very hard to defend the amount of space and the sort of barrenness of the environment within a laying cage.
Are you 100% happy with the welfare of hens in cages in New Zealand?
You're never 100% happy with anything.
Bob Diprose heads the Egg Producers Federation and is almost content to defend the battery system.
This is the best system we have at present for the general welfare of the hens and the production of eggs.
Certainly for the farmers.
Production of an economic food. It's not just for the farmers, it's the best for the hens' welfare as well.
But we've seen the birds. We've seen the birds, as I say, rubbed raw, the front of them. We've seen them.
You've seen some.
Debeaked. We've seen them without feathers.
Actually, the question overseas is not so much, do hens suffer? The question there is, what do we replace the battery hen system with?
And what's the answer to that question?
The answer to that question in New Zealand we see as free range.
Free-range hens, about 4% of New Zealand's current flock, are those with full-time access to the outdoors. At only about 300 birds per acre, the system is, not surprisingly, much more expensive.
The eggs cost more to produce, there's no doubt about that.
Graham Carey's company, Free Range Eggs New Zealand, has about 20 farms around Pukekohe and a market that extends to California. Watch his hens, and not only will you see them dust bathing and pecking, but their beaks are untrimmed and there's little evidence of feather loss.
They're in a natural situation and they generally like those conditions.
And indoors, the contrast with battery farming continues. This is where the birds perch. During the day, they're free to come and go at will. At night, this is where they all sleep. Next door, there's a second area where they feed, a grain mix to add to their outdoor diet. And in a third room, the nesting boxes, where, as naturally shy creatures, they're happy, the farmers say, to lay their eggs in private. Battery farmers say that their hens are happy being in cages.
Well, that's a hard one to justify.
Of course, some battery farmers not only say their hens are happy, their eggs are marketed as such, something the RSPCA considers misleading advertising, while the free rangers are especially concerned with slogans like country fresh or farm fresh.
People go in thinking they're getting a genuine farm egg and they're not.
That's totally different to welfare, and I have no comment on that.
Well, does it not at least suggest that poultry producers are not at all proud of their caged egg production from the fact that they certainly don't advertise it?
I mean, that's their decision.
As you can see, they look terrible, first of all.
In Midtown Hamilton, Hans Kriek and his supporters take their fight against cages onto the streets.
The feathers get worn away because they're in such tiny enclosures. So how long were they spending it, you know?
Oh, I can spend up to 80 months.
And then that's their life, and then after that they just die?
Their throats cut.
SAFE's aim, of course, is nothing short of cutting the throat of the battery industry. put people in cages, and they hope they'll be converted to supporting free range.
I don't believe in battery hens.
In the supermarkets, it's clear some shoppers need no convincing, concerned either for the hens' welfare or for their own.
The hens are getting more natural food, so therefore you must get a better quality egg.
But most, of course, are buying on price, about $1.60 per half dozen battery eggs, much more for free range.
I read those that notice over there, which are the free range eggs, but I'll probably normally buy those, but because I'm on such a tight budget, I go for the cheapest eggs.
I usually buy the free range ones. I just stopped there because it was closest.
But the reality is that if everyone changed to free range, there simply wouldn't be enough eggs, either now or, according to the battery farmers, at any time in the future. They claim the extra land required would make it commercially prohibitive. And even the animal behaviourists say free range isn't the answer, because without first-class management such as on this farm, it involves a greater risk of disease and cannibalism.
I myself lean towards something like more space and a more diverse environment within a small flock interior housing, because I see the advantages that...
Does that still mean cages but larger?
Yes, I think you would have to describe them as cages but larger, and I know I'm not going to be in line with people on that one.
But Dr. Temple is in line with the thinking overseas, especially in Northern Europe, where many years and many millions of dollars have already been spent trying to design the perfect cage, with features like perches and nesting areas and much more room. Visiting European expert David Wilkins says in Europe the need for change is more widely accepted than here. New Zealand, he says, needs to catch up to protect its already recently battered clean green image.
I think New Zealand has to be a little bit careful that they don't fall behind in the animal welfare world, as it were, and they have to keep up with the progress being made in Europe.
But there's a problem, a big one. However willing New Zealand might be to learn from Europe's example, the Europeans are so far stronger on promise than on practice. If all their research has proved anything, it's how hard it is to find the answer. Incredibly, Europe still can't decide how the hen-friendly cage should be built. As a consequence, the latest recommendation from this country's Animal Welfare Advisory Council, the main advisors to government, is to do nothing but wait. New Zealand, it seems, wants to follow the leader. But what can you do when the leader doesn't know where to go? As MAF's National Advisor on Welfare Issues, Dr. David Bayvell defends the policy of wait and see. He says there simply aren't the funds to do more.
I think one would have to concede that our New Zealand research effort is extremely modest by international standards. So thus we are taking note of what's been done internationally and also carrying out some discrete research in defined areas in New Zealand.
The thing about hens is that really they are much more intelligent than people, and particularly their public image of hens, which gives them credit for.
At the forefront in the local research, Dr. Temple, with one of a series of experiments in which a hen must repeatedly peck an illuminated pad if she wants to make her cage move, in this case onto a bed of peat.
We're looking at the question, how hard will she work for peat?
And especially, how hard will she work to exercise her natural behaviours, pecking and especially dust bathing?
It's like saying to you, how much are you prepared to pay for something?
And the hen's answer, however many pecks it costs. In effect, telling researchers what she wants in a modified cage, whenever it's finally ready.
Even in the European community, they're talking of 5 to 10 to 15-year timescales for modified systems. And we are talking of change management over of that type of duration.
The industry, or at least the industry spokesman, claims egg producers will be ready to accept change, so long as it's to a proven alternative.
But at this point in time, while there is not, the industry is not going to invest capital in something that may or may not work, and in 2 years' time, might be outlawed.
I've had farmers come to me and say, look, Bill, We know we're going to change. We are ready to...
The animal behaviourist, too, counsels caution.
And I have to say to them, look, at this stage, I don't know, and somehow, as far as I can say, the best brains in Europe don't know. And...
So while we go on floundering around, the hens, if they are suffering, go on suffering.
If they are, yes, then by definition, yes.
To groups like SAFE, of course, there's no question. And no question either of accepting anything less than 100% free range.
Like this bird has never felt grass under his feet, so it's going to be...
Release in the future for all hens.
Never felt grass. Never felt grass, never even seen the sunlight. Never felt the sun on his body. And even now, when it might start to rain, it has never felt a raindrop on his body. We hope the government will, after enough public pressure, start a phasing out period of battery hen farming. We never will accept a severely modified cage.
Never accept, never surrender. Welfare warfare that's so far without winners. Certainly not the hens. Who does the pressure have to come from for you to change your ways? I mean, the government, consumers, do they need to stop buying the eggs currently? It'll have to go into law, won't it? It'll have to become law before we change. You'll have to be forced into it. We'd have to be forced into it, yeah.